Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Welcome to the gallery members and the media and council. To our January 13th, 2025 regular council meeting. I call the meeting to order at 1 p.m. and I would ask my council at this time if any of you have any added items to the agenda. Thank you. So I will accept that as consent that there's no added items. The adoption of the agenda, I will ask for a motion for the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that the regular and closed council meeting agenda for Monday, January 13th, 2025 at 1 p.m. be approved as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. We will now move down to page 3 of your agenda, item 2A, please. And this will be the regular council meeting minutes for December 9th. Does council have any questions? No deletions? I would take that as consent then of approval of the December 9th meeting. We're moving down to item 3 now, delegations and presentations. And this would be on page 9 of your agenda. Item 3A, Infrastructure Quarterly Report. And I'll turn this over to CAO Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And Director Pedro is with us today to lead us through his quarterly report.
Good afternoon, Council. I am happy to guide us through our Q4 for infrastructure services. And we will start off with our utilities summary. I will note there was a bit of a typo on this table. Under sewer main inspections, it does say we've only done 1 kilometer year to date. That actually is should be flipped with the 47 kilometers that are outstanding. So year to date for sewer main inspections is approximately 47 kilometers. And then utility digs, we did 25 in Q4, and we did 3 water service repairs as well. Next page. On to my favorite number. This is our water loss and wastewater loss tracking spreadsheet. I will note that on essentially from September onward, we are seeing favorable numbers in both the water and wastewater loss percentages. At the time of publishing, Council wouldn't have seen the December numbers. However, as of last week, we did get the water utility bill volumes. And so we were able to calculate the water loss and wastewater loss. And the water loss was at 12.59% for December. And the wastewater loss was at 19.83 for December. So we are seeing a decrease in both areas, which is good to see. All right, this is our graph that we do track the water loss and wastewater volumes. And so what we've seen in essentially from October to end of November is that they were relatively in line. What we are seeing in December, as Council will note on the blue line, it is slightly higher than the orange line. Now what that tells us is that likely there is an additional source of water being lost in the system. This could be from one or multiple leaks that we haven't found yet. So it just really highlights why tracking this information is important so we can identify those trends. And on a similar note, next slide is tracking the precipitation versus our wastewater volumes. Now, as you can see, wastewater volumes were relatively constant for Q4. What's interesting to note in this analysis is that, as you can see in the blue and yellow lines, those are our precipitation volumes, and we're not seeing as much of an effect on the wastewater volumes post any sort of precipitation, which is exactly what we want to see. Now, granted, we're not in the wet months, so this correlation will likely change. However, this is just one of the data points that we do track to identify if our efforts are effective or not. Next slide. I did want to give Council just in highlights of our Imperial Drive sanitary replacement. And so as a reminder, there's a few images of the actual pipe condition on the left and on the top right. We have replaced this in Q4, and one benefit here is that we did remove a buried manhole that nobody knew was there. So in that green space, we did find a manhole that was buried, I think by about 6 or 7 feet or so, and it was taking on water into the manhole. So it's just one of those it was logical to get rid of it because we don't need it. And so we've dealt with that source of infiltration in that line there. So everything went fairly well on that project. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Director Pedro, would you
Yes.
prefer council questions as you go or to wait until the presentation's over?
As we go is fine. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just make a note, please, and if you have a question, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dahl. I was going to wait until the end, but thank you. Appreciate that. Just wanted to go back to the water loss and INR update on page 12. If I just had a quick question. I know that I see the numbers have been going down. I did see a little bit of a blip there in November where the percentage went up from 18 to 25. Was there or 26? Was there any kind of reason for that, or did you see something? Is there something happened in that particular month, or can you just speak to that?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So what ultimately caused that increase was a lower utility billing volume. And in November, we saw about 60,000 cubic meters of water that was billed. That is lower than our average. And so what we saw is the Water Commission incoming volume was relatively the same for November. Our outgoing wastewater volumes were roughly the same. However, the utility billing volumes were even lower, which causes that percentage to go higher. Now, what's causing that could be a few different things that we speculated at this point. The zero reads and the non-reads play into that. There is our meter reading only reads in whole numbers. So what you see in the billing volumes is that if there's one property, for example, that used 10.2 cubes that month, we'll only pick up the 10 cubes, and then the rest will be in the subsequent month. So some of that gets incorporated into there as well. But yeah, it was there's a bit of an anomaly at this point. So
See no further, go ahead.
all right. Yeah, a couple more. One more. Perfect. So just highlighting another project that we did complete in Q4, and this is our sanitary main relining. All the locations are shown in green on the map. In total, they were about 2.8 kilometers worth of sanitary relining. Some of this work was based on previous locations that were identified, and then about half of these locations were added based on some of our camera footage this year. And then that picture in the bottom left corner of the slide is just what the pipe looks like after the relining. Far superior to what it looked like prior. Next page. All right, as this slide indicates, this is our water meter replacement program locations for 2025. All the locations highlighted in yellow are the proposed locations for that replacement program. We are looking at replacing 640 meters in that area. And so what we've done is we've combined looking at the dates, the install dates for those meters, many of which in this area are 15 years or older. And then we did want to consolidate our efforts on the leak detection side. And so the southwest corner of town being one of our biggest areas of concern. And so we chose to go with this layout. So that was done in Q4, and we are looking at starting that in Q1 this year. All right. Next steps. As council may remember, this hasn't changed a lot since our Q3 next steps. We are going to continue doing any sort of leak detection, inspection work, and repairs. And we are obviously going to replace all of those water meters, which should help us with those utility billing issues. And so much the same. However, I will note in 2025, we will be doing more work physically on the replacement or repair front. Although in 2024, obviously, we did quite a bit, but we also did a lot of assessment in 2024, which will translate into actual work in 2025. Any questions?
Deputy Mayor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just a question through you to Director Pedro. Do we have in the funnel, in the hopper now, a list of hotspots, potential leaks? Like you mentioned, there's a little bit of maybe some iffiness with the December data. So do we have a bullpen of items that we can address right now? And what would the timeline look like over Q1 with camera and various surveillance activity?
Great question. Lots in the works at the moment. So we have 3 outstanding water leaks that we're dealing with at various locations around town, 2 of which are in the southwest quadrants. So, and referencing back to the water meter map in those locations, so 2 actually are in those areas, and then the other is by the south reservoir. There's a sizable leak there that we are dealing with. The other ongoing project is actually modifying both our pump houses. So right now there's essentially inadequate metering in those 2 locations, and so we're actually replacing and installing new meters at appropriate spots so that we can actually reconcile what's coming in, what's going out versus the utility billing volumes. And so right now there's a lot of discrepancy between all those numbers. And so we're just doing that analysis, and there's physical metering going in place to assist with that. So that's on order. That will likely be in place in February. So yeah, and then on the sanitary side, as we showed in that table, we are close to being complete all the camera work. And so once we receive all that footage and all those reports, I expect we'll have a lengthy list of locations we need to repair. So whether that be sanitary main relining or water leaks that are getting into the sanitary sewer, or sanitary replacement projects, that's coming as well. So this year we'll be quite busy. We do have the $1.8 million allocated towards the program. So that's going to consist of water leak repairs, manhole lining, sanitary main relining, sanitary replacements, likely sanitary sewer repairs as well. So quite a bit, yeah. We'll have a full plate for sure.
Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just with regards to the meter replacement process, how are new builds affected by that replacement process?
So we would, depending on where they're located, if we're going to, as part of this meter replacement program, we're also going to purchase inventory for ourselves. And if, if they're in an area that is of a concern and is adjacent to some of the other meters, we would likely install one of the new meters for them. And if they're not, we would essentially install our census meters, which are the old meters, which we do have stock of at this point until all those are depleted.
Go ahead.
Moving on. Oops. Next page, please. All right, jumping to our public works side. So being Q4, of course, we've been largely occupied with winter maintenance. The nice thing I will point out about at least the data side of what we do, you'll notice under pothole repairs, contracted snow removal, and winter road maintenance, we are actually are able to track the hours that are being put towards these. And so tying into the whole asset management service level analysis, having that data going forward is going to be important. What we are going to be doing as well, heading on to this, is tracking costs associated with vendors or contractors, for example. So for an exercise such as contracted snow removal, we obviously hire quite a few trucks during that process. And so we will be able to track their hours and how many trucks, and that data will be reportable as well. So we are slowly but surely moving on to better reporting for all of our tasks. But the team was fairly busy. Next slide. All right, planning and infrastructure. So I did want to give council a high-level summary. 52nd Street is finally complete after much headaches on our end. Highway 27th and 70th Avenue, probably not something many people think of as it's been going on for a few years. But that has been finally approved by Alberta Transportation, which took us a long road to get here, but they are happy now, so we're happy. And then thirdly, of course, the LUB and MDP updates. That is well underway with ISL, and they are feverishly working on it based on our schedule. All right. This is the fun information here. So largely what we're seeing is there has been an increase on building permits and valuations. I will note the small little table in the bottom left is perhaps the most important of this slide. What we have noted, and I'll give our team a lot of credit here, particularly our new development officer, we have slashed approval timelines by roughly 50%, based on, compared to the first 6 months of the year. So we've done quite a bit of work internally, and we're quite an efficient group. And so we see that any permits handled by the development officer, they're getting approved in 11.5 days. And then anything that comes to council is still at that 22.8 days. However, there's a longer process there, so we need to line it up with council meeting dates and get circulations out. So it tends to be a longer process. But all in all, a lot of credit to the team. There's a much needed increase in efficiency there, so I think we're doing quite well.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to Director Pedro. No, I know that we're delayed, you said, with council meetings, but overall it's still a little bit of a quicker process than it was when we used to do the MPC meetings, because they were only every month, once a month. So is that helping somewhat that we're doing, still it's coming to council as compared to MPC?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, just having the option of 2 meetings versus 1 meeting certainly helps.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Before I go to Deputy Mayor Wilson, I just wanted to tag on to the same question. Would the time span have anything to do with also the fact that we've had Christmas and vacation days amongst staff, et cetera?
No, I don't think so. I think it's mostly internal processing. Times have picked up.
Thank you, Director Pedro. Deputy Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And the information is quite timely. I was at the CLC this morning bench pressing my 10 pounds, and I had somebody come up and ask me, how long does it, they had referenced in the old days, 90 days to get a permit approved in Olds, and hence people would go elsewhere. When I respond to the individual tomorrow, and what day can I give him that says, hey, if this flows through the development office, and only the development office, am I telling them we're doing approvals now in 11.5 days, or is it 11.5 plus 5.8? And then obviously, as you said, the council stream is a different set of numbers. And certainly kudos to the development group for shortening up the timeline. But bottom line, what do I tell my colleague, this individual, in terms of, here's how long it's now taking us?
Right, so great question. I always love hearing those analogies. So that middle column, processing time from application date, that would be total approval time. So between deemed complete and then permit being issued. So that would be the number you would relay in that context.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I have a question with regards to that council one too, and is that as a result of us having, two meetings a month, or is it result of because we have to, a lot of these ones that come to council have to be advertised for the 2 weeks advertising dates, or is it a combination of the two things?
I think it's certainly a combination, and depending on what the application is, there can be more back and forth. If there's more nuance to the application, we need to go back and forth with the applicant, and then we need to prepare the submission and circulate and then bring it to council. So I don't anticipate we could bring that down to any applications that don't need to come to council, but I think there's still a room to improve that process.
Supplemental.
Just one other question, and that was, so the numbers of development permits that are coming to council, has that, we don't see the numbers here, but has that decreased over time? Because we have only 6 that have come through council over the quarter, so I'm just wondering if we're seeing more because we've given a little bit more authority to our development officer. Have we seen those decrease to sort of speed things up, the process?
It's a great question. Largely, it's because we've been sort of doing our amendments so that less comes to council. But I think that's also just the volume of permits that need to come to council is less as well. So it's a bit of both. Yeah.
Board, we're good.
Okay, thank you. So following up to those statistics, just a comparison of our housing starts and our building permit values between 2024 and 2023. Obviously, a stark contrast there. 130 housing starts in 2024 versus 29 in 2023. Now, of course, there are some larger building permits baked into these equations, but it is a noticeable increase, which is nice. And moving on to the next slide. So similar to building permits, we've had quite an increase in development permits. So 138 in 2023 versus 173 in 2024. And again, there are larger projects that are adding to this valuation. However, but I think we're moving in the right direction for both building permits and development permits.
Councillor Cummings?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. In the past, we've talked a lot about, under development side of things, the inventory for housing and how, when I look at these ones, especially the building permit statistics, seeing how those building permits then convert to occupancy levels or availability of our inventory moving into the house, into the process. I don't know how close the town administration is on issuing the occupancy certifications for homes, or if that's strictly an Alberta thing. And if it is, do we keep track of that? So I'm going to use as an example the one project, and that's the 76-unit multi-family dwelling for $14 million, 76 units. It represents more than half of our occupancy potential and housing starts. And of course, this is multi-year development. Started, I believe, in 2023. We see this in permit in 2024. We'll see some occupancy, hopefully, in 2026, maybe. I don't know. Is there a way that we can easily track how the inventory goes from planning stage to actual available inventory in the community?
Short answer is yes, we could look at including that. I would caution that there could be a lag time. So depending on when a permit gets approved, whether it's a building permit or a development permit, you may not see that occupancy number, correlating occupancy number, go up for 1, 2, multiple years, depending, but it is possible.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So supplementary to that exactly is that's my point, is we see that a development permit might start in year 1, depending on the size of the unit. We may not actually see some actual concrete benefit to the community for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the project. And that's something I think would be useful for us to know just as we're so concentrated and concerned about housing availability in our community, is how long does it take from the development side of things to actual available housing units in the community? I'm not sure how to best understand that so that we can see some, like right now, great, 130 building permit housing starts in 2024. How does that actually help us make availability? So I know, is this an effect that's going to happen in 2024, 2025, 2026? I don't know. So that's what I'm curious to see if we can see some sort of benefit to understanding that through the data that's available to us already.
Thank you. I'll let the CAO answer this question.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. To Councillor Cummings' questions. When a permit is closed, we do obviously understand that. Whether or not occupancy occurs is a different matter, but annually with our assessment increase, council's given the overall assessment growth in residential. Half of it, or sorry, part of it's inflation growth, the other half is building growth. So that is a lag indicator as well in terms of what's coming on the market. That second part of the assessment growth was the actual construction value growth. And we can look into amending this presentation going forward if it does make sense at all for, say, closure of building permits, but it's not something I don't think we can answer too accurately at this time.
Thank you, CEO Williams. We'll go to Deputy Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And through you, I presume perhaps to the CAO and along Councillor Cummings' line of question there. Is there an expiration date to a development permit? Clearly, once the permit's issued, we're at the whim of the investor, i.e. the developer. Does the permit carry an expiration date, or is it essentially open forever and a day? Thanks.
So it is not endlessly open. They technically do have 1 year to start. They don't need to complete, but they do need to start within that year. And aside from that, we could issue an extension if they don't, but they need to approach us for that.
Looks good to move forward.
Right. Moving on to some summary findings from our pavement assessment report. So council has funded this work, so we have completed it in Q4, so I did want to provide a bit of an update there. What we're seeing on this slide is called the Overall Condition Index. There's a plethora of data that's included in this type of analysis, but the OCI, as we call it, essentially just gives you an overall condition of that road surface. Now, the good news, in fact, I don't use that phrase often, but the good news is that our mean OCI is 61. Now, this range is out of 100. Generally, what we like to see in these assessments is that most of the roads are 60 and above. So in this case, we're 61. We're fairly close. But what that means is that approximately a third of our roadway network requires corrective intervention. We largely saw this on the collector and local networks. So the arterials were in relatively good condition. So not a bad assessment, but there is work to be done. So it ties into the next slide, and which shows our pavement assessment needs. Now, so we take, well, the consultants and in the report takes all the data, breaks down what the need is per year. And so what we're seeing is that unfortunately, if we had all the money in the world, 28.3% of our roadway network requires some form of corrective action in 2025. And that's just a hypothetical calculation, and that's in order to bring that OCI number higher. Now, 28.3% of our roadway network is quite a bit. We are, no municipality is capable of doing that, but there are numbers that we like to get down to. The max, industry max, is typically about 25%. Once you get over 25%, then it's sort of a bad indicator that we're not keeping up with the road rehabilitation work. So 10% is the benchmark for smoothly running pavement rehabilitation system. So we do have some work to do. The good thing, as you can see in the graph here, is that 36% of the network only needs work after 2035, which is good. But yeah, lots of good data here. On the next slide,
I believe Deputy Mayor has a question.
Thank you, Mayor Dalton. Again, through you to the director, just a quick question. Could you define the spectrum of corrective action? Is that everything from simply pothole repair to spray patching to rip up and repave? Or is it the worst case of corrective action, meaning we got to rip up and repave? Thanks.
so it would cover everything from, not necessarily potholes, but everything outside of that. So whether it's a microsurfacing treatment, mill and pave, or largest scale would be full-scale replacement, including base work. What we're seeing in the data, it's not necessarily shown on these slides, but the majority of our rehabilitation needs fall into the mill and pave category. So that's actually positive, because what that means is that largely the base of our pavement roads is in relatively good condition. So if they required, based on this assessment, if they required anything further than a mill and pave, then obviously that's a greater need, larger project there. So this is strictly to deal with the actual surface itself when we're talking mill and pave. All right, now this table here is we've taken an approximately annual budget of $1.6 million, which is generally what we would take out of the MIP program, and then we've put it into this needs assessment, and assuming we spent that every year over to 2034, we would eventually have our road network at an OCI of 72, which is much better than where we are now. So this is just a theoretical forecast of what we can do with our approximate budget. So as you can see, it would take a number of years to get us to that number, but it does bring us down to a 4% efficiency rate, which is fantastic. All right. Moving on, we are just pulling out some data for our citywide work order system. Now, what we can see in Q4, the team in infrastructure did 532 work orders. I will give them a lot of credit here. This is relatively on par with what they did for Q3. And so this is all broken down by category and the type of work order. As you can see, water was the largest category. That's largely due to a lot of the work we're doing on the leak detection and investigation side of things and those subsequent repairs. So it is certainly a bit busy group. And then roads and water meters are another large category for us. So we are certainly busy. And on the reporter problem / service request side of things, we saw 38 reporter problem submissions in Q4. It is lower than Q3. So either we're doing a great job or, there aren't as many deficiencies. So either one. Moving on to health and safety. Not a whole lot to report here. We only had one incident in Q4. And it was a minor incident there, so nothing to be concerned about. And looking ahead, we touched on a lot of this earlier, but of course continued a lot of our current initiatives, preparation for the meter replacement program, on the public works side, continuing winter maintenance. We are doing a lot of work on the asset management side as well, getting the public works assets in there. And then on the planning side, of course, continuing with the current projects and continuing on asset management policy and framework development there. I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Pedro. It was very thorough. I'm very grateful for your report. And are there any final questions from council at this time? If not, I'd entertain a motion, please. I believe Council Ryan had her hand up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Dole. I move that council accepts the Infrastructure Services Quarter 4 report as presented for information.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried, and thank you once again for your report, Director Pedro. We are now moving down to page 31 of your agenda, item 3B, and this is Development Permit DP 24212 for 5703 48th Avenue, and thus is the salvage yard. Sia Williams?
Thank you, and I'll pass it over to our DO, Nathan Hill. Nate, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Council. This application is for a salvage yard at 5703 48th Avenue. That parcel is designated I-1 light industrial, where a salvage yard is a discretionary use. Because it's a discretionary use, Council is the development authority for this application. This application was circulated to 17 landowners, and administration received no comments about this application. The proposed salvage yard would take vehicles to a parcel where they would be dismantled in the industrial building on the northwest portion of the parcel, with the parts being distributed through an online service, and anything not disposed of that way would be hauled off-site to a metal recycler. The applicant has told administration the vehicles will not be crushed on site, and as such, administration has included that as a condition of the draft approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nate. I'm looking at the development permit now, and there are 10 conditions, and you've reported to council. Does council have any further questions? Yes, Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Through you to Development Officer Hill. Nathan, as of number 6, it says all fluids, oil, fuel, coolant, etc., will be drained and stored in approved containment systems. Is there any inspection system in place for that to know that it is actually being done?
I don't believe so on our level. This is normally captured by Alberta Environment and
Perfect.
and Protected Areas. This is just due diligence on our end.
Okay, good. That's good. That's what I was curious about. I was just a little concerned about that draining into our stormwater system. So if that process is in place, then I'm good with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blatz. I see no further questions at this time. I'd entertain a motion, please. Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council approve development permit application DB 24-212 as presented, subject to the conditions listed in the attached draft development permit.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, Development Officer Hill. Will you be standing for the next item as well? Very good. Moving down to page 43, please, of your agenda, item 3C, development permit DP 242214 at 4730 52nd Street. We will be starting with item 1 on page 61. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Council. This application is for an accessory building with a maximum height waiver, maximum total accessory building area waiver, and also a variance of a side property line setback. This is in the R1 district, which is our low-density residential district. Because the building asked for variances of over 15%, council is the development authority on this application. Excuse me. Administration does not typically circulate applications for variances, but because of the significant nature of the variances, administration felt it appropriate. In this instance, 9 adjacent landowners were notified the application. At the time of this at the time of this report, administration received one comment with no objections if it's a temporary building, but as I will discuss later, administration has no means to hold them to a temporary building and as such expressed opposition, and also received a letter expressing no objections. After this report was submitted, administration received an additional 2 letters with no opposition to a building. The applicant has requested a variance of 8.4% to a maximum height, 57.7% to a total area, and 100% of a side yard. The proposed building function as a storage building for a boat that the applicant intends to repair on the parcel. The applicant has expressed an intent to remove the building off of the parcel after the work is complete. However, as it's a permitted use, council and administration have extremely limited conditioning powers, and as such cannot place an enforceable timeline on an approval. The building is proposed to be surfaced with reinforced polyethylene. As per the East Olds ARP, accessory buildings have to be coated in similar materials and colors to existing buildings. Administration did not include a condition to that effect in the draft approval, but if council chooses to, that can be added as well. The applicant, as stated, has requested a variance of the height of the building, but that's under 15%, and as such is within administration's authority. The gist of the application is the requested variance to the area of the building. In the R1 district, with large parcels, there's a maximum of 110 meters squared for all accessory buildings on the parcel. In my report, I mentioned that the total coverage of the parcel remains under 55%. That includes accessory buildings, the primary buildings, hard surfacing, anything else that would affect the drainage of the parcel. Lastly, the applicant requested a variance of 100% to a side yard to allow the applicant to attach the building to a fence. Given the size of the building, administration has concerns about attaching a building to a fence, especially as we don't have a power to make him remove it in the future. As such, administration has recommended recommended a refusal of that variance, which the applicant has expressed that they would be okay with. The application as a whole, given the significant nature of the variance requested, administration felt it appropriate to leave it to council's discretion as far as how to advance on this application. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Development Officer Hill. I will now look to council for questions. And Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, through you to Development Officer Hill. Nathan, I did read here and somewhere in this application, and that it is not going to be a permanent structure. It's just a temporary structure while he does the work that he's requesting to work on. Is there any way to determine a time limit that this could be in place? Did I miss something through the application when I was reading it? I don't really have an objection to the structure itself. I just wondered if there would be, how long we would know that was there, and as long as it wasn't going to stay there in perpetuity.
Yeah, absolutely. Through chair to the councillor, I'm on pages 58 and 59. I highlighted excerpts out of the land use bylaw because it's a permitted use with a variance. Our powers are specifically limited on these applications, and as such, I can't enforce or I can't impose an enforceable timeline on any approval.
Okay, thank you. I did read that, but I just was looking for a little bit of clarity to see if that could be, if that we would have any authority over that. But thank you for that information.
We will move to Deputy Mayor Wilson, then Councillor Daly, and Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and I really don't have any question. I think the brief addresses the issues. I have a comment. I'm conflicted on this one. We have really no disagreement from the residents other than can we make this and ensure this as a temporary structure. Myself, I do have an issue with the footprint of the accessory building and the fact that it's a 57, almost 58% variance from the allowable of about 15%. But again, my conflict is heightened because on a total area basis, as Development Officer Hill pointed out, we are at the 55% or lower. So, as I said, yeah, I just little pieces of information here, but I do have a concern just with the accessory building, the storage building itself, and its variance, the size. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dole. So I have a couple of concerns with this. First of all, in regards to it being a temporary building, my thoughts is that, okay, it's going to be a temporary building. Why can it not be then within the side yard variance as all other buildings? Because as you had mentioned, we have no authority, or we have no way of determining that it is going to be a temporary building. And I would really like to see that side variance be maintained. And also with the exterior facade of the building, we have heard lots in the last few meetings about upholding the East Olds development plan. And part of that plan is to, as you mentioned, that the facade should be similar to the existing buildings on the property. And so with those two conditions, being that we have no way of determining what temporary actually is and whether we can enforce it or not, I would really like to see this application go forward with those items in place for the residents of the nearby neighborhood there, that this fit in with the East Olds Development Plan in those ways. So that's my comments on this.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a couple of quick questions here, well, questions, I'll say. So within the land use bylaw for the town of Olds, how does this structure differ from a poly car park or a tent, both of which can be defined as temporary? So what makes this one not temporary with regards to the land use bylaw, not intent?
Sorry, one moment, I'm just pulling up my district. I think what differentiates this application is mostly the size of the building. It's a little bit outside of the scope that we usually see for a tent building, which is usually under 110 square feet. With this building being a large one and having most of the structural components of a building, that was our determination.
So I guess the next thing then is, do we have the power to make an amendment or changes within our land use bylaw that can give us the power to create temporary rules within these permitting processes to turn around and say, if this situation comes up in the future, we can put a temporary length of time the building is allowed to be on the ground. So it seems like me, if it is a rule of the land use bylaw, we create the land use bylaw, we ought to be able to change the land use bylaw to address these issues moving forward. Is that something we can do, or is there some overreaching authority that says we can't do that?
My understanding is that we can, and that is an item we're going to be looking at. And looking to Kyle for any objections. No. Yep. That is a tool we can add in the future.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I don't really have any questions, but just a comment, and that is, I am concerned about the fact that this is a temporary structure and we have no means of making it a temporary structure. Temporary for some people could be a couple of months, and some people could be a couple of years. And I don't want to see something sitting there for a couple of years, that's for sure. My also concern is that the side yard setback at 0, I can't support that, and also the 57% increase in the accessory building total area seems very overwhelming to me, how much of the space this is going to take up. It looks like it's going to be a big giant building in somebody's backyard that doesn't really conform with the East Olds area structure plan in that area. So I have several concerns with regards to this. Just want to.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I will now go to Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think we're losing sight of what temporary means, and I have no doubt this will not be a permanent building. And Councillor Cummings asked my question, can the land use bylaw be changed? We always seem to be caught in our own rules and being able to grant these type of things. So I'm glad to hear that that can be looked at going into the future. But I would have no problem supporting this as a temporary structure. I understand how it's being used, and the neighbors don't really have a concern as long as it's temporary. And I see the applicant is here in the audience, and I'm sure he understands that.
Thank you. Any further comments? Do you have any closing comments, Development Officer?
I think the one thing that I would highlight is that So if council were to approve this application, administration has recommended a refusal of side yard setback, and yeah, I think that would be my one point.
Are you saying that in our request for decision, the refusal that you have on the request for decision, if council does approve this, would be in order?
No, in the draft DP on the screen, administration didn't include a side yard setback in our approved variances.
Well, that would be included. Very good. So that would go on the motion that I would request council, whichever councillor chooses to do. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to Development Officer Hill. So you just want this listed with the applicable side yard setbacks, is that correct? If we approve this, the motion to approve, what?
If council wishes to refuse side yard setback, don't have to make any amendments to the draft permit as included in that.
Oh, okay. All right. So then
I have
will
one,
ma-
before we go to your motion, we
Okay.
have Councillor Walsh. Okay, very good. Thank you. Councillor Blatz.
So then just for consensus sake, I'm just going to read the motion as it is written, correct? Correct. All right, perfect. All right, I move the council approve development permit application DP 24-214 as presented, subject to the conditions listed in the attached draft development permit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blatz. We have the motion on the floor, and I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Development Officer Hill. We will now move forward to new business. New business is page 66, item 4A, and this is a council sponsorship request for Olds and District Kiwanis. C.O. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. This request is an annual request from the Society to Council. Up until 2022, it was $1,000 council granted and it moved to $1,200 in 2023, and it's been that way since. So administration is recommending an approval of a one-time donation of $1,200 to the Olds and Districts Kiwanis Music Festival Society.
Thank you for this application, and I will look to council for any comments. Councillor Walsh.
I can make the motion. I move that a one-time donation of $1,200 from council's general sponsorship fund be approved for the Olds and District Kiwanis Music Festival Society's 2025 Festival of Performing Arts.
Yes, and I highly recommend if any council members and/or viewers have time to sit and listen to some of these students and contestants. It's a beautiful concert. But we have a motion on the floor. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Page 69, please, item 4B. This is Mountain View Power sponsorship request, Rotary Club of Olds. C.O. Williams.
Yes, thank you again, Mayor Dahl. So this is coming from the Mountain View Power budget within council's purview, as the sponsorship request is over $500. This one is unique for the main reason that Mountain View Power hasn't had a lot of sponsorship requests since its inception. Last year, essentially, was the first year we started formally doing it. So there's no exact formula to tie how much money, let's say, an event sponsorship, which is the parameters Mountain View Power focuses on, economic activity and events that drive that activity, how much sponsorship is warranted based on the size of the event. We do hope to get to that point as we have just more events and figuring out what level of economic impact an event has and therefore how much sponsorship is warranted. So in this example, it's for the Rotary Club of Olds regional Bonspiel, which is going to draw several hundred people to town. The request was for $5,000, which, to provide you with an analogy, last year council also gave $5,000 to the Olds Broncos volleyball championship. Based on that, that event drew a similar number of athletes, but several thousand spectators as well. So based on my logic, and it's highlighted in the background to a small extent, that given that there's no significant spectators expected at this Bonspiel, but still around 400 or so attendees, I felt recommending to the council $1,000 to $2,000 range was warranted based on the two sponsorships to date, the Oldstoberfest and the Olds College Broncos volleyball tournament. Now, but given that there's not a clear formula around this, it is council's discretion. But happy to take any questions, comments, and Councilor C-Spade.
Thank you for that note, and I would just like to note as well that this will be bringing in 24 teams and 150 attendees to our community. So this does strengthen the local sports tourism in the area and economic impact. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Have we been given any information on the risk to the event, a change in the scholarship or the sponsorship amount would have on the event?
No, nothing has been provided.
Okay, do we have no further questions? Yes, Councillor Daly.
Just a comment that I agree that, you know, in proportion to the level of economic development that this would bring to our community, I would agree with your recommendations. Between a $1,000 and $2,000 sponsorship would be appropriate for this type of event, being that it's more of a in-house as well. It's the Rotary Club that is putting this on. It'd be Rotary members that are participating in it. I would be fine with recommending $1,500 sponsorship, and I leave that open to the rest of council for discussion. Start somewhere.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. We'll go to Councillor Ryan, and then I'll ask for consensus on the floor. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I was going to suggest that same amount that Councillor Daly just mentioned too. It's 10% of what the budget is for sponsorship, and I think it's a good start since nobody has applied for that before and hasn't been used. It would be a good way of starting off with a gauge for the future and how much money we would give out. So I'm happy with that amount.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. So I will go around the table for consensus, and we've had two recommendations that perhaps we start at 1,500. Would 1,500 be consensus around the table? Yes, thank you. Would you like to make that motion, Councillor Daly?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move the council approve a sponsorship in the amount of $1,500 to the Rotary Club of Olds for their 62nd annual curling bonspiel.
Thank you. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? Thank you, and thank you for your explanation, CO Williams, in regards to this. Moving down to correspondence now, or sorry, item 4C in new business, page 71. Council annual standing items schedule. This is for information, but would you like to speak to any of this, CO Williams?
The only change, I guess, on my end, really, the departmental report schedule, we are trying to make sure we get 4 divisions into council each year, as we have fallen short just based on some scheduling. But outside of that, I believe on the departmental reports and on your invitations to key stakeholders, it remains pretty comparable to last year. So unless council notices anything significantly different that needs to change, just a motion to accept for information, and we'll proceed with scheduling throughout the year.
Yes, thank you. And just to inform council, as you can tell, the letters are in our agenda package. The MLA visit and the MP visit letters have been sent, and they are in your package. Any further questions? I'll ask for a motion, please. Deputy Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that council accept the council annual standing items schedule 2025 as presented.
Thank you. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Now we're at item 5A, correspondence and information, page 74 of your agenda. I do understand that we will have the ad hoc committee also speak in this area. Council Wanda, Councillor Blatz will. So if you're looking at your agenda at this moment on page 74, are there any other areas from A to E you would like to ask questions to prior to Councillor Blatz? All right, seeing none, I would open the floor to Councillor Blatz to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and I'm speaking on behalf of the ad hoc committee that we had for the procedural bylaw review. And in keeping in the timeline, we were supposed to have had a review of the bylaw prior to January 31st. We have reviewed the entire bylaw and will be bringing it forward, but I'm asking for council's consideration to bring the review and the bylaw on the February 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting. At that time, we can have a fulsome discussion. From there, it will go back to legal before coming back to council for final consideration. Would that be all right? We have reviewed the whole document and have been working on it diligently, but due to timelines and restraints over the holidays, we just couldn't get it to people sooner. So if that would be all right with everybody, if we would have consensus to say that we would bring it to the February 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting?
Just confirming, just one moment, please. Any other comments? I don't have a problem with it coming. I just wanted to make sure that we're not going to have too many people away on February 3rd. Okay. Are you okay? You're all good?
Okay. All right.
I believe you have consensus.
Okay, perfect. That's what we're looking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have no questions, so I'd ask for a motion, please, to accept information for correspondence. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the correspondence and information report ending January 13th, 2025 be received for information.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh, as well as the report from, it's all together, report from Councillor Blatz. Very good. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Now we're moving down to page 81, please, and I'll move this over to CAO Williams.
Thanks, Mayor Dahl. And the only things I have today are the two items in the package. The first being the report or problem summary from December 1st to December 31st of 2024, of which there was just 17 complaints or 17 problems registered with our online system. And as note to that, staff that receive phone calls also register manually into the system as well. With the holidays and the relatively calm weather, the only larger complaints were roads and parks, which all concerned icy conditions, which is not that surprising for the time of year. Everything was actioned accordingly with nothing within our control closed off. The council action items lists looks very similar, hasn't changed much, but I believe the next time you see this list, I will start amending this a little bit better. This was started a couple years ago, and since that time, council has started using both the notice of motion but also general resolutions to direct administration. So I believe having this amended slightly to be more of a resolution tracker, that resolutions passed by council that are actionable, nothing like passing the agenda, for example. We will start putting motions on here to show the status of whether they're complete and progress updates, as opposed to this kind of ad hoc catch-all, which I've been using to date. So not that exciting, but maybe it's exciting for me, so stay tuned. With that, happy to take any questions on this or other things within my purview. That's all I have.
Thank you, CAO Williams. I do really appreciate the, it looks like an addition to me, the test case on boards, committees, and commissions and rotation plan for the next electoral term. That's very important, to be able to come to the table and already have something in place for the very first council meeting. So thank you for that. Any further questions? I'd ask for a motion, please, to accept for information. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that the Chief Administrative Officer report be accepted for information.
I'll call the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We will be moving into a closed meeting, so for those of you joining us via live streaming, the meeting stream will be replaced by a graphic while council is in a closed session. And when the graphic is removed, that will indicate that the meeting is ready to reconvene. I would ask for a motion, please, to move into closed. Deputy Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that council enter into a closed session at 2:10 PM. Item 1, FOIP Section 16, disclosure harmful to business interests of a third party, referencing user group contract. Item 2, FOIP Section 17, disclosure harmful to personal privacy under personnel. Item 3, FOIP Section 16, disclosure harmful to business interests of a third party under the SRD Waste Commission. And item 4, FOIP Section 21, disclosure harmful to intergovernmental relations, Olds College, with all those present remaining.
Yes, very good. Councillor Cummings.
Sorry, just a quick clarification. That's the or the Water Commission, not the Waste Commission. Wastewater Commission. Damn acronyms, I'll tell you.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Deputy Mayor Wilson. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We will take a Welcome back, and thank you for your patience. We have reconvened our meeting back to the regular meeting, and I will call on Councillor Cummings.
My finger was not strong enough. Increase the PSI on that. I'd like to make the motion that council accept for information the CAO's report on user group contracts, personnel, the SRDRWC, and Olds College update.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. At this time now, I will call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Once again, thank you very much for your patience, and I will adjourn the meeting at 3:43 p.m. Take care.